Good morning. It's a delight to launch today Rana Daily Weekly podcast, in which we delve into several interesting topics in the energy sector, starting with fossils, energy transition, and renewables. In this topic, we are going to shed light on climate change, how to tackle that change, amid the dominance of fossils on our energy needs. Time they are participating with roughly 90% of CO2 emissions. So this is our big question. Have we paved the way to another alternatives? So my host today is a scientist with a long expertise in the energy sector. Her name is Dr. Tatiana Mitrova, research fellow at the Center of Global Energy Policy, Columbia University, founder and director at the new Energy Advancement Hub, NEAH. She is also a senior research fellow at Oxford Institute of Energy Studies, distinguished research fellow at the Institute of Energy Economics, very rich expertise in Japan, and she is visiting professor at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris, Sciences Politiques. Good morning, Dr. Tatiana. Welcome on board. Finally, you are my guest today.
Thank you for this invitation. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. So we are coming back from Baku, where an important event was taking place, which is COP29. A crucial decision has been taken, which is a plan to finance the developing countries with $300 billion every year, so till to 2035. So talking about climate change, many countries are hugely investing in renewable energies, even in decarbonization. But fossils still dominate the global energy needs by more than 80%. Time, we don't have many alternatives to fossils derivatives. I'm talking about plastic, ethylene, polyethylene. So my question, Doctor, how can we transit time many are calling for to stop investing in fossils?
Well, the answer is simple and complicated at the same time. If you take a look at the IEA's net zero scenario, they are showing basically one of potential pathways. Yeah, it's doable both from the technology perspective. All the technologies needed to transitioning to net zero are there. Yeah, we do not need nuclear fusion or any other non-existing technologies to reach this goal. It's also doable from the financial perspective. I mean, capital investments, which are required, they are actually even lower than capital investments needed just to sustain our fossil fuel production and consumption. But the problem is that the whole industry, and I'm talking not only about energy industry, but the whole industrial manufacturing all over the world. The way people are living should change. And this is requiring a lot of political will and a lot of social support, which is not there, unfortunately. I mean, as the whole world, as humanity, we could have reached this target. But if we look at the progress made so far from 2015, it's quite disappointing. Fossil fuel consumption is growing. CO2 emissions are growing. Yeah, and basically we are not on track with 1.5 degrees so far. Though, I mean, the climate scientists are still saying that if we mobilize all our resources and focus on this goal right now, there is still window of opportunity, there is still chance to achieve net zero, but we do not see this progress happening. And you've referred to COP29 conference in Baku. Yeah, it's probably another illustration that there is a lot of interest, there are a lot of discussions, there are some investments taking place, but these efforts are definitely not sufficient, especially when we are talking about developing countries. I mean, mature economies like European Union, Japan, for example, they are making incredible progress. But when we are talking about India, China, or other non-OECD countries, Southeast Asia, Latin America, okay, there the progress is not actually that visible. And so if we do not unify these efforts, it will be only Europe decarbonized and green. It will not help to save the world,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I am quite, well, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but concerned. We are not doing good job so far.
Yeah, you said that technology is available to reach that goal. What kind of technology available at the moment to replace the plastic? I mean, if we stop investing, for example, in oil and gas and fossils, we don't have alternatives for plastic and all rubber, polyethylene, all that stuff. Do we have technology to make something similar to plastic out of fossils?
You know, I want to make a very important distinction here
Mhm.
because energy transition is not equal to stop investments in fossil fuels completely. And I think it's one of the myths which is migrating every year from one discussion into another, which is, I assume, a big mistake. And even if you take a look at the latest World Energy Outlook 2024, published by the International Energy Agency in November, they are saying very clearly cutting investment in fossil fuels ahead of scaling up investment in clean energy would push up prices and undermine just, orderly, and equitable clean energy transition.
I have seen that report.
Yeah, so it is, and even in the scenario of net zero, there is oil production, there is gas production. It's lower than today, but it's not zero. It's not negligible. First of all, for the sake of plastics, yeah, you've mentioned it, it's really very difficult to replace. It can be decarbonized potentially, first of all, with carbon capture. Yeah. So with very advanced sustainable chemistry, but it doesn't mean that the world should refuse completely from doing anything with oil and gas.
And exactly, I totally agree with you because many people say that phasing out oil, phasing out gas, and I think this is a big mistake because when we burn oil, we burn natural gas, that time we talk about emissions. But when we talk about petrochemistry, we are just making transformation of oil and gas to another, let's say, derivatives, let's say plastic, ethylene, polyethylene, many derivatives. And that time we are participating to decarbonize oil and gas because we are not going to burn it. And this is highly important, I believe. And I really share my opinion with you. So let's say in 2023, we have recorded the highest levels of coal consumption of reached 8.7 billion tons. So meanwhile, we are consuming about actually 102.8.9 million barrels of oil per day. And it's a record historically. In the same year, the global energy-related CO2 emissions grew by 410 million tons, reaching 37.4 billion tons. As a scientist, with your long experience in both fossils and renewables, when do you expect that we can talk about flattening the curve of these emissions?
You know, in a perfect world, we could achieve it in this decade. But as you read the news, as you are looking at the whole geopolitical landscape, you can agree that the world is not perfect at all. Yeah, so there is huge geopolitical uncertainty. And I mean, let's be serious. Right now, the world is discussing seriously the most challenging nuclear crisis since Caribbean. So basically, there are major conflicts in Eurasia, in the Middle East ongoing. The interests of national security are now becoming much higher on the agenda of the politicians than they were like a decade ago when Paris Agreement was signed, for example. So I'm not sure that these geopolitical considerations will not postpone this flattering. So it's achievable, it's doable, but just imagine, I mean, knew the results of the US elections, the right-wing parties becoming much more influential in Europe, quite a specific position of China regarding its own decarbonization. These are just few examples. And even, I mean, when we are talking about India, the country is claiming all its net zero targets, but at the same time keeps burning a lot of coal and buying a lot of Russian oil simply because opportunistically right now it's more beneficial, it's easier, it's supported by the society. Yeah, so let's not forget that the politicians are responsible in front of their voters. So they need to show fast results. They need to show fast increase in the level of life. And here, this dilemma for the policymakers, it's a sort of marshmallow test. Do we show something very quick gains, yeah, very easily achieved, and it can be done very easily with fossil fuels? Or do we go through decarbonization, new investments in the green technologies, which are not that obvious? Yeah, so it's difficult pathway, and that's why I think IEA still keeps publishing 3 scenarios. Net zero, announced pledges, and these steps scenario with the stated policies. My bad feeling is, to be frank, that the world is now somewhere between stated policies and advanced pledges, but very, very far from net zero pathway. So if you look at the numbers in steps, yeah, then actually peak is like 2030, 2035. So therefore, maybe it will go beyond this decade. Maybe it will move in 2030s. Though at the same time, I would say incredible progress made during the last 5 years, I would even say, not even a decade, with the electric vehicles penetration. Yeah, it's amazing. With the renewables, yeah, most of the new investments in the energy sector, they are going into renewable production. So we see this change in the oil balance, in the oil demand. It's not linear, but it is happening. So earlier or later, this peak oil, which everybody is discussing, we will reach it. The question is the timing. Will it be 2027 or 2029 or 2032 or 2035? And this is moving target depending first on the economic performance, GDP growth, yeah, which is also closely related with the geopolitical stuff and also financial crises, whatever. Yeah, and with the geopolitical considerations themselves, because when you remember the energy trilemma, yeah, so energy security, affordability, and environmental acceptability. So right now in this trilemma, I think the focus is shifting to energy security at the expense of environmental availability.
Exactly, well said. When you talk about the EV, I see like similar contradiction in India or in China. Electricity generated in India is 80% coming from coal, and the same for China. China 60% of electricity is also generated from coal. So when you run your EV car in India, you have a chance to plug it with electricity generated from coal at 80%. At this case, I think that diesel cars are more environmentally friendly. That's how just to highlight this. But I think the EV is taking its right place, especially inside European Union. Why inside European Union? Because they are facing a reality at the moment. They want to get out of any. They don't want to rely on any fossils coming from Russia or from USA or from the OPEC countries. They want to be energetically dependent. That's why they are investing a lot in renewable energies. And I think the EV will take right place inside Europe, because the chance to plug a car with the energy mix they have inside the European Union, you have the chance maybe, let's say 40%, depends on the country, 40%, 60, in Germany at the moment, I think is 50% of electricity generated from renewable energy. So more you have the chance of renewable energy in your grid, more you have a chance that the EV car will take right place, I believe. So thank you very much for shedding light on EV. So allow me to go to the second topic of this podcast. We talk about decarbonization. So decarbonization is a key solution to reduce GHG emissions and to limit the globe temperature by only 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the levels before the Industrial Revolution. In many cases, we need technology to reduce these emissions. And my question is, why the developed countries don't share their know-how and technologies with developing nations so we save the planet, as we have only one ozone layer and one atmosphere? What do you think about this?
This is a critical question. Technology transfer, it is something so obvious if we are serious about achieving climate goals. And at the same time, it is so difficult if we think about geopolitical confrontation, which is now increasing between, unfortunately, all major players. It's not like Russia and the West, it's also the US and China, Europe and China, US and Europe have their own concerns. So this global division, which suddenly came up after many decades of rather peaceful coexistence and globalization. Yeah, right now, I mean, this confrontation, it might not take the forms of military conflicts, but trade wars. Yeah, they prevent from any technology transfer. And this is another illustration that the world is not perfect. I think, I mean, technologies cannot be completely locked in one country anyway. There will be some penetration, so there will be followers which will somehow replicate these technologies, making their own mistakes, making their experiments, spending a lot of money and time just to get something that potentially could have been given to them very easily in a friendly manner. Not the case. Yeah, once again, unfortunately, this is our reality. And, you know, when I was developing all the modeling for the global energy outlook several years ago, it was one of the key assumptions. Whether there is technology transfer or not, it affects the speed of energy transition dramatically. Without technology transfer and without this support to the developing countries from the OECD countries, the whole transition will be much slower. And another thing that you've mentioned, this smoothness of energy transition. Yeah, because if you have already a lot of electric vehicles, but your electricity generation mix is reliant on coal, transition is quite questionable.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just formal indicator, but this energy transition is unique. Yeah, with previous transitions, like from wooden biomass to coal, or from coal to oil. Yeah, there was just single technology which was making the whole revolution. It was like steam engine, then it was internal combustion engine, and it was quite easy to change the whole industrial.
It was like systematic transition. Yeah.
Yeah. This time, when we are talking about fourth transition to the renewable energy sources, we can name a lot of technologies. So these are renewables, it is hydrogen, electricity storage, electrification, including electric vehicles, CCUS. So, I mean, and it all has to be put together with digital technologies, because no human being can dispatch all these renewable generation manually. Yeah, so growing all these different technological stacks simultaneously, yeah, synchronizing it, it's another big challenge for all the countries. But for the most poor countries which do not have money, it's probably the biggest constraint. Even if they get by chance some technologies of, let's say, electric vehicles, what will change with their emissions? Nothing. It will be maybe slightly better with the air pollution in the big cities, yeah, but that's it. It's not changing the climate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a big issue. Technology at the moment, I think, will make like let's say it's the backbone of any change, any transition, I believe. And I strongly believe that without sharing that technology, we are not like going to boost the energy transition. We are not going to make a shortcut to our energy transition. And I strongly believe that technology, I think, available at the moment. Many countries they have technology, and let's say direct air capture. There is CCS, carbon capture and storage, CCUS, hydrogen fertilizers. So they have access to technology. I think if these countries can share this technology, I think we can add value, because at the end of the day, we have one ozone layer and we have one atmosphere. So if we don't make a teamwork, I believe at the end of the day, we are not going to reach our targets. My last question is directly to you, exactly as scientist. You have seen several. I have seen you several times in Arctic as researchers and explorer and scientist, and you have witnessed the climate change in poles. How do you see that impact physically? I mean, melting ice, rising sea levels, and endangered species. So, how do you see? We all hear about climate change, but I think you have touched it as a scientist, as explorer.
Unfortunately, I'm touching it on the everyday basis. I am living in Cyprus, and severe heat waves and sand waves and droughts are here. I mean, for 7 months, we didn't have any rain in summer. So you don't need to go to Arctic to see the consequences of the climate change. But speaking about my recent trip was to Antarctica, yeah, to the southern pole, and I would say it's amazingly beautiful. It's just unbelievable. I couldn't expect anything like this, with these blue eyes and
Yes.
fantastic creatures, these charming penguins and all this stuff. So you can see how fragile and beautiful this land is. And at the same time, you can see this ice melting. Yeah, so glaciers are shrinking, and the seawater is really rising. And I felt like I have this privilege to see the land, which might, in a certain case, disappear in just a couple of decades. It is frightening. It's really frightening. But unfortunately, you can have this feeling when you are going to the islands like Maldives. Yeah, they can disappear with all these corals and beautiful fishes and everything. So it's not only extreme locations. Basically, we have to be looking around. The whole world is changing. And again, unfortunately, as I said, I'm not pessimistic, but I'm quite skeptical. Unfortunately, we might have to start to think about adaptation as well, as the climate is already changing and we are already experiencing this change.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I have to thank you for sharing some photos and some videos you have taken over there, and it really was really amazing. And my opinion is, when we talk about climate change, I think that big policymakers in this world, they have the capability to apply the regulations. They have the tools to make a smooth energy transition if they want. But the big problem, I think, is they are themselves relying on fossils. That's why it seems like difficult for them also to make that smooth energy transition. So I have to thank you so much. It was really, really great pleasure to welcome you and to host you to our Rana Drill weekly podcast. And I hopefully to meet you, to see you, and to host you in other opportunities. Hope so in the next future.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.